So welcome everyone to, where is it? There it is. Be a Toastmaster. Oh, what did it? Sandra will handle this. I don't have to deal with it. This is the first in a series of webinars to help you become the best Toastmaster you can be. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people have been afraid to take on a particular meeting role? Either one particular role, or maybe you've been afraid to take on several different roles, just afraid of all of them. And I know a lot of people are. I see it in my clubs all the time. So what I hope to do today is prove to you that meeting roles are nothing to be afraid of. I am going to try to take the fear out of meeting roles. We're going to begin with the tag team. What is the tag team? T stands for T, A, and G. T stands for timer, A for counter, G for grammarian. And when we talk about meeting roles, there's before the meeting, the beginning of the meeting, during the meeting, and at the end of the meeting. These three particular roles have something during all the various parts. And I'd like to start with timer. Timer is one of the easiest and one of the most difficult roles. Why do I say it's one of the easiest? We had a meeting years ago. Hardly anybody showed up. Among the people who showed up was a woman who had just moved to Israel. She had been a Toastmaster in the United States, and I believe she was a DTM, a Distinguished Toastmaster. But this was her first meeting at Toastmasters in Israel. She brought along with her her husband for moral support. And because you can't leave a child home alone, they brought their daughter. The girl was about 11 years old. As I said, almost nobody was at that meeting. So I asked the girl, the 11-year-old, if she would be the timer. She agreed. I showed her the stopwatch. I explained the role to her. And when I say I explained the role, I spent less than 3 minutes explaining it, probably closer to 2 minutes. She did it flawlessly because it truly is an easy role. Why do I say it's one of the most difficult? I'll get to that in a few minutes. So what does the timer do? At the beginning of the meeting, you introduce your role. How do you know what to say? You read the timer script and log. For everything that I'm going to show you, I am going to give you a handout at the end that has links to all these different resources. So the timer script and log begins with a script that tells you exactly what to say when you are introducing the role. And then during the meeting, you show colors to keep people on time. How do you do that? It depends. If you're meeting on Zoom, it's quite easy. You just use virtual backgrounds to show colors. Green, yellow, red. Now you see, they don't look so good because you can see red on my head, red on my arm now. But if I block the camera, then you won't see that and it'll be a much better picture. Like that. How do I block the camera? I use a piece of white sticky tape. It works really well. Or I can throw an old sock over it. Doesn't matter. Whatever. So how do you use those virtual backgrounds? On your Zoom, you should have a menu that looks something like this. And over here next to the video icon, there's an up arrow. You click on that, And that brings you to this menu. And as you can see, in addition to a bridge and plants and whatever, I have my green, yellow, and red colored backgrounds. And I will give you the link so you can download these also. And once you download them, if you click on this plus, you will be able to add them. The backgrounds work best if you have a green screen. I don't have a green screen, but if you look down here, I checked that I do have a green screen because my computer says I can't use virtual backgrounds without a green screen. So I lied. I told it I have a green screen. And as long as I'm sitting with a blank wall behind me, it works pretty well, especially when I block the camera. But what if you're not on Zoom? What if you are in person? Or if you're on Zoom but don't have the virtual backgrounds? That's very simple also. If you are at a meeting of your club, you might have a book of timer cards, a little bound up booklet of green, yellow, and red cards. Very easy. And you don't even have to hold them up. You can buy a little easel about this big from Wish or AliExpress, and you just put the cards right on that little easel so that the speaker is looking right at it and you don't have to keep holding it. Otherwise, it's best if you hold it the whole time. And if you don't have the book of timer cards, any other papers will do. They don't have to be official timer cards. A green paper, a yellow paper, and it doesn't even have to be a full size. A red paper. And what if you don't have colored paper? Any green, yellow, and red object will do. I think peppers work quite nicely. Green, yellow, and red. Exactly what you need. But I know one member of one of my clubs has a green notebook, a yellow book, and a red jewel case for a CD. Whatever you have that matches the colors works just fine. How do you keep track of the time? You can use a stopwatch, but I happen to like to use my phone and an app called Timer for TM. It looks like this when you start it. There's a drop down here, so you can choose speech, table talk, evaluation, or even simply stopwatch. And these times are adjustable. If, for example, somebody's doing an icebreaker, you can change this to 4, 5, and 6 instead of 5, 6, and 7. When the person begins speaking, you click start. At the appropriate time, it turns green, then yellow, and then red. You're probably wondering, why did I say timer is one of the most difficult roles? Because some of the people in Toastmasters are excellent speakers. And I can tell you there have been times I have been listening to a speech, hanging on every word. I am just so into it. And I forget to look at the time. But when I see this big green circle hit me in the face, I remember that I have to change my virtual background. So I think it's really good to use something like this that just hits you in the face. At the end of the meeting, you're going to deliver a report listing how much time each person took. And I have an asterisk here because some clubs do this after each meeting section. After speeches, they give the timing for the speeches. After table topics, they give the timing for the table topics, etc. In some clubs, they time the prepared speeches, the table topics, the evaluations, and that's all. Other clubs time a lot of different things: a toast, a joke, a grammarian's report. If you look at the agenda, it will tell you which items are being timed. And as timer, you are responsible not only for keeping track and writing the time on your list, but also for showing colors at the different times for every section that gets timed. And that pretty much covers timer. So we'll move on to counter. What does the counter do? At the beginning of the meeting, you introduce your role. How do you know what to say? Use the counter script and log. It's right there for you, tells you exactly what to say. And you can even see on this one part of the log. During the meeting, you keep track of all the filler sounds and filler words. The ums, the ahs, the ers, the you knows, the likes, the so's that don't belong. And now, I hope you all have something to write with and something to write on, because it's time for a test. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, speaking of writing, that I'm going to take questions at the end. So if you have a question, make a note of it so you don't forget. And now you're probably thinking, a test? She didn't tell us there was going to be a test. How can we take a test? Let me tell you, this test is hard. It's harder than anything you will encounter in a Toastmasters meeting. So if you can get at least 50% on this test, you are more than ready to be an counter. Let's begin. We're going to listen to this lady speak. And the first time through, just listen. You'll get an idea.
We
There's no
don't
sound.
hear. There's
Oh.
no sound.
I'm sorry. I made a big note to myself. Don't forget to share the sound. And I didn't. So let's try her again from the beginning.
And you know, it is reckless. It is playing a reckless game with our economy.
Okay, we're going to do it again. And this time I want you to write down the filler sounds, the filler words, the things she repeats.
And you know, it is reckless. It is playing a reckless game with our economy.
Okay,
And
wonderful. Stop.
And you know, it is
Everybody, unmute yourselves. How many you knows did you count? Just shout out the answer.
3.
Three.
Very good. There were 3. How many times did she say it is?
3, I think. 4. Yeah.
I hear a 3, I hear a
Three,
4. A 3. 6.
6.
Actually, she said it more than 6 times, but 2 of the times it was actually part of a sentence. So I let her have those. What about Did you hear any ums?
1.
Anybody
1
else?
2.
1 What about
1.
1, I think.
2.
Oh.
And then did you notice she started with our economy? She had to stop the sentence and start again. That's also something an counter should listen for. We're going to listen to her one more time with the script so you can follow along. Oh, what happened? There we go.
and you know, it is reckless. It is playing a reckless game with our economy.
There was a couple of airs as well with our economy.
How many people got 100%? I don't see any hands. If your camera isn't on, you can always use the reaction to raise your hand. How many people got 50%? Okay. If you got any, is there anybody who didn't catch anything? Okay, as long as you got something, you're already doing a good job. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to do your best. And nobody's going to say anything if your best isn't perfect. So if you got through this and caught at least one of those, you are ready to be an counter. At the end of the meeting, you're going to deliver a report. Be nice. Don't say John had 3 ums and Tony had 25. Just say John had 3 ums, Tony, you had more than 5, and send him a private message in the chat and let him know how many he actually had. Because certain numbers, it just gets embarrassing. And now if you can mute yourself again, we will continue with grammarian. At the beginning of the meeting, you introduce yourself and you introduce the word of the day with a definition and examples. How do you know what to say when you introduce your role? You use the grammarian script and log, and there it is. Toastmasters provides everything you need. During the meeting, you're going to keep track of uses of the word of the day, good uses of language, and not so good uses of language. And some people are afraid of this. I can't be grammarian. I'm not a native English speaker or not a native speaker of whatever language the club is meeting in. It's okay. First of all, it's easy to keep track of uses of the day. Every time someone uses the word of the day, you make a note of it. Very easy. The good uses of language. This reminds me of a former student of mine. Her name was Rena. She's a Russian lady. She was quite advanced. And during the lessons, sometimes I would say something and she would say, "Oh, I like the way that sounds. Let me write that down." And she'd write down what I just said. So when you hear something you like, make a note. And then the not so good uses of language. Let me tell you, I do not speak Hebrew well at all, but I have caught grammar mistakes. But not every grammar mistake, but I've caught several in people. You don't have to know grammar perfectly. You can, if you're not sure, make a note of it and then ask. I heard this. I'm not sure if it's correct or not, so maybe somebody can help me. And you say that when you're doing your report at the end of the meeting. And I have to tell you, at one club, at more than one club, they combine the counter and the grammarian into one role. And the first time I was grammarian at that club, a couple people made a couple of little grammatical mistakes, but I corrected them in my grammarian's report. And afterwards, the president of the club came up to me and said, "We don't mention grammar mistakes in this club." I thought, okay, that's interesting. And by the way, they do now. So that pretty much covers the tag team, right? Wrong. There's something new. Toastmasters International has recently added some new tools to help you perform these roles. How many people have seen the updated website? If not, you're missing a treat. Let's take a look. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Here is the updated website. Looks pretty different. When you log in, you get to a welcome page. And if you scroll down, down, here's Basecamp, by the way, that's important. And as you scroll down, you will get to meeting tools. You click on meeting tools and you will get this screen, a meeting tools overview. And note, it says beta. You know what that means. They're still working on it. It's not perfect, but it's still pretty good. Let's take a look at how it works. This is the counter tool. You need to know how to introduce your role. There's your script. Tells you exactly what to say. Then it automatically puts in today's date. And if you're a member of more than one club, you choose which club you are doing this for. And then you select a member. This is not you. This is the member who is speaking. So for example, why is it doing this? Because I chose Modi'in as my home club somewhere along the line. I knew I shouldn't have done this. We're going to come back to this one in a moment. Let's look at the grammarian tool. Again, you have the script, so you know exactly what to say. The date, the club, you can choose the club if you're in more than one. And you type in the word of the day. So let's say today's word is good. And then you select a member. Again, not you, so I'm not going to pick myself. I'm going to pick La'ar. And then as he's speaking, if he uses the word of the day, I just click that. And then anything else, if he uses the word of the day a second time, I might write word of the day 2 times. And if he says something that I really like, I might write nice use and then whatever he said. Or if he made a mistake, I might write mistake and whatever he did. And then I save it. And I go on to the next person. And at the end, I can view my report, I hope. And there it tells me the word of the day is good. Those who used the word of the day, I used the word twice. Mary Jones used a nice word, trepidatious. And La'ar Glukowski used the word of the day twice. I was playing with this earlier, which is why you see some names here. And here's a bug in the program. Mary Jones did not use the word of the day, but she came up on the list of those who did. And this word of the day thing is a little bit of a problem. Aside from that, it's either yes or no. Some people use the word of the day more than once. I have asked Toastmasters to change this to a counter. Whether or not they will, I don't know, but we'll find out. Let me refresh this. And now let's take a look at, we'll come back to the counter again. Here we go. So the counter. Again, it's not, I'm going to pick Kobe this time. And he says, I hit the plus. He says it again. I hit the plus again. He says, and then no, he didn't say he said, So I can hit the minus and then the plus. And at the end, I hit save. In Israel, people say but if you look at these choice of words, is not here. I can edit the filler words. I can get rid of words I don't need, and I can add one by typing it in, clicking plus, and then saving. And remember, this is beta, not everything works perfectly. At the end of the meeting, my screen is too busy right now. At the end of the meeting, you can get your report. You report, and it tells you how many people used different words, different sounds, what sounds they used. And now we have timer. Works similar to the other two. Again, you have a script that tells you what to say when you're describing your role. The club, you select a member. So I'm going to pick Eugene, he's not here. And then the speech type. And here's another problem which I have reported to Toastmasters, and they have said they will fix it. You can select the speech type. You have icebreaker, prepared speech, extended speech, table topic, and evaluation. In level 3, there's a project called Deliver Social Speeches. The speeches are 3 to 4 minutes. Doesn't fit into this list. In presentation mastery, in level 5, you have prepare to speak professionally, 18 to 22 minutes. It's not on this list. So I've asked them to update the list, and it would be even better if they could make it variable. When the person starts speaking, I didn't pick person, and I didn't show you one other thing. If it's a guest, you just click guest, and then you can enter the guest's name. Throat warbler mangrove. And you pick the speech type, which of course is not always what you need. And when the person starts speaking, you click start. At this point, I want to recommend something. If you're at an in-person meeting, you can bring your laptop and do it on your laptop, or you can do it on your phone. It works just as well on the phone. If you're in a Zoom meeting, you're going to want to use your phone because this takes up your whole screen and you want to be looking at whoever's speaking. Unless you have 2 monitors, then of course you have your Zoom monitor and your timer monitor. When the person finishes speaking, you just click on stop and it stops it. When it's green, it looks like that, yellow, red. And then when you want to view the report, you click on view report and it tells you each person, what kind of speech it was and how long they spoke for. So that really does cover the tag team. And I want to tell you one more thing about these tools. When I started preparing this presentation, those tag tools didn't exist, or if they did, I didn't know about it. But I found out about them a couple of weeks ago. I added it to this presentation. And then in between the time I added it and today, they changed the website and how to find it. So I recommend that you check the website regularly because they are still making changes. Remember all the changes that would be finished by May 8th? Well, they're still making changes. And they didn't say May 8th of which year, I guess. So keep checking the website regularly. There are always changes. So now let's go on to Table Topics Master. At a club meeting tonight, our Table Topics Master is doing it for the first time, and I practically had to hit him over the head to agree to do it, but he agreed. It's not that difficult of a role, really. Before the meeting, you want to find out the theme if your club uses themes. Not every club does. In some clubs, the Table Topic Master actually chooses the theme of the meeting. That makes it very easy. In other clubs, it's the Toastmaster or the VPE, or could be any number of ways of choosing the theme. When it's time for table topics during the meeting, the Table Topics Master, or the Topics Master is the official title, explains what table topics is and why we do it. And how do you know what to say when you're introducing the role? You go to the Topics Master's script and log. Then you start choosing people one at a time to answer questions. And there's a disagreement. Some people like to say the question and then pick a person. I like to pick a person and then say the question because that's more like how it is in contests. You don't get time to think about it. The feeling behind saying the question first is it gives everybody the opportunity to think about what they would answer. But you know what? When somebody asks the question, chooses a person to ask the question, I think about what I would answer. It's possible. So either way you do it works fine. Or if you're in person, you can have the questions written out in advance on pieces of paper and the person chooses one out of a bucket. Again, it's the question for that person, not for everybody. Or you can have typed questions and put them in a private chat to each person. Any way you handle it is good, doesn't matter. So what is a good table topics question? First of all, you want a question that will encourage members to give an opinion. Yes or no questions are generally not good. An example would be, do you like winter? The person can just say yes or no. You can make it a better question. Do you like winter? Why or why not? An either or question is also pretty bad. Do you prefer dogs or cats? But you can add, do you prefer dogs or cats? And tell us why. That makes it a little bit better. A really good question is, what do you think society should do to combat climate change? That's a question that makes a person think and give an opinion and not just have a choice of something. It's very open-ended. It's a great question. One that I would not want to answer because it's a difficult question, but it would make me think. You don't want to ask two people the same question unless you want one to answer pro and one to answer con. I was at a meeting last night and somebody, the table topics master, asked the first person, why should we do this? And he gave a great answer. And then asked the next person, why should we not do that? And she said, but I think we should. So it kind of missed out on the beauty of that. Remember, if you join a debate club, you don't always get to choose which side you're arguing. You have to argue the side you're assigned, whether you agree with it or not. And finally, table topics questions should be questions. I was in a table topics question, and the question was, a fool and his money are soon parted. Okay, but that could be a question. A fool and his money are soon parted. Do you agree? Tell us why or why not. Or even better, a fool and his money are soon parted. How have you seen this in your life? And that's an open question. Last year, I was a judge at a contest, and the question was blue. Blue is not a question. Blue is a color. It's one word. It was not a very good question. So now that we've covered the questions, who should you choose to answer the questions? Talk to your VPE because some clubs have very strict rules on who to choose. But in case they don't, here's a good rule of thumb. First, ask members who do not have roles. Remember, the purpose of table topics is twofold. First, to help us practice impromptu speaking and learn how to think on our feet. But second, to give everybody a chance to speak. So if you have members who have not had roles, then give them the first questions. After that, ask visitors and guests. And you definitely want to do this. When somebody comes to a Toastmasters meeting for the first time, asking him to participate by answering a table topics question could be the difference between getting a new member or never seeing him again. And remember, whether it's a first-time visitor, a long-time Toastmaster, a member, the person always has the option of saying, no, thank you, I don't want to answer today. And you don't pressure the person. After the visitors and guests, you can ask members who have minor roles. And if you still have time, ask members who have major roles. Generally, speakers will not answer table topics questions. But last night at the meeting I was at, we were so far ahead of schedule that everybody had an opportunity to answer a question, including the speakers. So it depends on how much time you have. And that brings us to evaluations. And there are two types, speech evaluations and a general evaluator. First, we'll look at the speech evaluator. This is a scary role, and everybody's afraid of this one, but you don't have to be afraid. You're not going to do this at your first meeting. You're not going to do it at your second meeting or even your fifth. Before you do your first evaluation, you're going to give your icebreaker speech, and you will receive an evaluation on that speech. Then you're going to do your writing a speech with purpose project and do that speech and receive an evaluation. Then you're going to do the introduction to vocal variety and body language project, and you will receive an evaluation on that speech. So you've already heard 3 evaluations of your own speeches, not to mention the evaluations of other people's speeches. And finally, you get to the evaluation and feedback project. First, you do evaluation and feedback 1. That's a speech on any topic. And just like all our other speeches, you will get an evaluation. Then you do evaluation and feedback 2. This is either the same speech exactly as you did for evaluation and feedback 1, or it could be essentially the same speech, but with improvements. Or it could be a totally different speech. The important thing is that the feedback you get from evaluation and feedback 1, you incorporate into evaluation and feedback 2. For example, if the evaluator says your hands were all over the place, your gestures were meaningless, it looked as if you were conducting an orchestra, for evaluation and feedback 2, you want to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? You want to be more deliberate with your gestures. If you're counting, the first thing is, the second thing is, the third thing is, make your gestures mean something. Or if the evaluator said you were looking down too much and at your notes, you weren't making eye contact, pay more attention, look at the camera if you're online, or make eye contact with the various members of the audience if you're in person. When you do your evaluation and feedback 2 speech, you will get an evaluation, as always. And then it is time to do your first evaluation. But you've heard evaluations of 5 of your speeches already, so you know what evaluations are supposed to be like. And you've heard evaluations of countless other speeches. So you've heard them, you know what they are, you should be ready. But before you do your first evaluation, although all the information is in the project, there's a tutorial that is wonderful. If you go to Basecamp, you click on tutorials and resources, and that brings up this menu. Click on tutorials, that brings up this menu. Click on tutorial videos, and you will see a bunch of pictures of different tutorials. Click on the one that says how to evaluate. And that will bring you to this, and you click on launch, and it's a wonderful tutorial. Even if you've done 10, 20, 30 evaluations, it doesn't hurt to watch this. It's a good refresher, even if you're an expert evaluator. And then there's the general evaluator. At the beginning of the meeting, the general evaluator introduces the role, explains the role. How do you know what to say? There's the general evaluator checklist, which starts with an introduction. Then during the meeting, you pay attention to everything and take notes. What is everything? Did the meeting start on time? Were there delays before, during, or after the meeting? Were all the roles filled in advance? We hope so. Did the role players know how to perform their roles? And did the evaluators perform their roles properly? Well, if they're here tonight, we know that next time they will. And at the end of the meeting, you give your report. It's really not that difficult of a job. You just have to pay attention. There are a few more roles we want to talk about. Toastmaster of the day. At the beginning of the meeting, you explain your role. How do you know what to say? The Toastmaster of the day script and checklist. And then during the meeting, your role is that of MC, Master of Ceremonies. You introduce the different role players, you introduce the speakers, you make sure everything runs on time. That's the primary role. You want to pay attention to the agenda. On Easy Speak, and I think maybe on Free Toast Host also, you have an agenda and a detail agenda. And there's a difference. These two agendas are for the exact same portion of a meeting. And you can see this beginning part is the same, but this middle part with the prepared speeches, it's a lot longer in the detail agenda because it reminds the Toastmaster to introduce the next speaker and to give time after the speaker for people to give feedback. So the detail agenda really helps if you're the Toastmaster of the day. And as I said, it's available on Easy Speak. And I would imagine Free Toast Host does something similar. Part of your job is to introduce a speaker. How do you do that? In one word, poets. And I'm grateful to Terry Burns for teaching me this. P-O-E-T-S. P stands for path and project. O stands for objective. E is evaluator. T is timing and title. S is the speaker. But just because the speaker comes last doesn't mean he also doesn't come first. So it would go something like this. Our next speaker is John Smith. He's working on presentation mastery and his project is Icebreaker. The objective is to do a speech on in any style to introduce yourself to the club. He will be evaluated by Mary Jones. The speech is 4 to 6 minutes and his title is What I Learned About Myself When I Visited China. Please help me welcome John Smith. And then you start the applause, because if you don't applaud, nobody else will either, but if you start it, everybody will. In some clubs, the evaluator reads the objective, even introduces the speaker, but this is a good basic introduction. Sometimes the speaker will write out a lengthy introduction. If so, read it exactly the way the speaker wrote it, because the speaker has a reason for wanting the introduction read that way. Some people like to put in a lot more information. I heard of one case where the speaker got up to speak after a long introduction and said, "You just did half my speech." So the poor speaker was left with only half a speech to give. So you want to make sure you don't say too much and you don't say too little. At the end of the meeting, you either turn the meeting back over to the president or sometimes the sergeant at arms, or you adjourn the meeting, whatever the custom of your club is. And then there are a couple other little roles, but they're fairly common, so I'm including them. The joke master. Before the meeting, find out the theme of the meeting and try to find a joke to fit the theme. If you can't, that's okay, any old joke will do, but if it fits the theme, and even better, if it gets the word of the day in there, perfect. And at the meeting, you simply tell your joke, keep in mind the timing. And then there's the quiz master. In some clubs, this is called the super listener or the hark master. I like that word, hark master. During the meeting, you take notes on everything, the introductions, the jokes, the speeches, the table topics. Whenever you hear a nice little tidbit, you write it down. At the end of the meeting, when it's time for the quiz, you remind the audience to unmute themselves. And then you ask your quiz questions and everybody shouts out the answers. It could be questions, for example, our guest tonight, Tony, said that he just got back from a trip to someplace. Where was he? And then everybody has to think, where did Tony say he was? Zimbabwe. Yes, very good. Or during Colin's speech, he spoke about what life is like in Canada. What did he say was the best part of living in Canada? And people will shout out the answer to that. At the end of the quiz, when you finish, remind everyone to mute themselves again. And at this point, I am ready for questions. So does anybody have any questions? And if you don't, it means one of two things. It means either I explained everything so beautifully, nobody has any questions, Or it means I explained everything so badly, you don't even know what to ask. So are there any questions? Sandra?
Can you show us again where I was playing around on Toastmasters.org and trying to find those new timer and counter. Can you show me again?
Sure,
where
no
that
problem.
is?
No problem. Let me go back here. From the welcome screen, Laura, you're going to be next. From the welcome screen, which is where you go after you log in, you just scroll down, 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 down. You may not have some of these things. You go down, down, down to meeting tools. And then you just click on meeting tools and the meeting tools overview will show up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Laura.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask, speaking of these tools, how efficient might you say they are? So, when I'm the ad counter or when I'm the grammarian, right, sometimes it takes me time to type it out or this, and then, it's already time for the next person to speak. And meanwhile, I have to save and then find the next person and then wait for it to load. And, by that time, maybe something worse. So, is that something that you've come across, or is that generally not a problem?
First of all, these tools are very new. I haven't even used them yet. And I have to tell you, I am very slow to adapt to technology. And I will probably be using paper and pen for a long time to come. But those tools do look very interesting. And right now, because they have bugs, I wouldn't use them. But once they get the bugs worked out, it may be very useful. But we'll see. And speaking of meeting roles, if anybody is free 45 minutes from now, our timer for the Modi'in Toastmasters meeting unfortunately had to cancel because her 2-year-old is sick. So if anybody wants to be a timer this evening, we really need a timer. So feel free to volunteer.
In English?
Yes, in English.
I'll do it.
Ah, Sandra, you're wonderful. Okay, great. Any other questions? Colin?
I was just, when you were going over the roles of the Toastmasters, and you hit on all the obvious points. One of the things I was thinking that maybe should be added there is if you have a guest, maybe you should make sure that they, get, recognized as a guest. Thank you for coming out, and maybe
Yes.
just get them to ask, whatever, why did you come here, etc.
Yes. Always good at the beginning, if possible, to introduce all the guests. And thank you for coming. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you hear about Toastmasters? What brings you here? And then at the end of the meeting, what did you think of the meeting? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn anything? Do you think you'd like to become a member? Always try to close the sale. Very important. A lot of times people will say, well, I didn't do it because nobody asked me to. So make sure you try to close the sale. Any other questions? Yasmin?
If you could please return to the general evaluator and what does everything mean? It was too fast for me.
I'm sorry. Okay, let me get back there. What is everything? Everything is everything. Did the meeting start on time? Were there delays before, after, or during the meeting? Were all the roles filled in advance? Sometimes you can't help it. About 2 hours ago, I got a message from our timer saying, my 2-year-old is sick. I can't come to the meeting. And everybody already has at least one role. So, but we try to get all roles filled in advance. Did the role players know how to perform their roles? We hope so. And did the evaluators perform their roles properly? Did they give good evaluations? Or did they just say, boy, that was a lousy speech and you really should do better? Or did they give a nice constructive speech? constructive evaluation. Okay, Yasmin?
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? In that case, if there aren't any, 1 second, I'm not looking. If there are no further questions, then I just want to remind everybody that the next webinar will be December 27th, same time. And the topic is contest. You can choose the champion. You can be the champion speaker. You can choose the champion if you want to be a judge. And I'm going to cover every role in a contest, from contestant all the way to contest chair and everything in between, and especially talk about some of the new rules. There was, I don't know if you're aware, but one of the big rule changes this year is that you can no longer use 6 CC speeches to qualify for the international contest. In Toastmasters General Efficiency, they have that in the rule book, that only 2 levels of pathways or the DTM qualifies you. But they neglected to change it in the FAQs. They neglected to change it in the speakers and the contestants eligibility form. And maybe there's somewhere else also they neglected to change it. So in a couple places, it still says you can use 6 CC speeches. You can't, but it started quite a long discussion in a WhatsApp group the other day, because not everybody was aware of the change. And some people said, well, if it's not in the rule book, I guess it's a change. And other people said, no, it's still on the eligibility form, so it still counts. So Toastmasters has been made aware, and they are going to, I hope, change everything to conform to the new rules. But it's important to know what the rules are. I hope to see you all then. I want to thank you all for coming, and have a good evening or morning or day or afternoon, wherever you are in this world, because I know some of you are way far away, quite a bit west of me.